Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome back to our weekly updates of the 2020 and 2019 elections, the 2020 presidential, Senate elections, as well as the 2019 gubernatorial elections. Before we get into that, of course, as always, there are going to be two presidential maps. One is my personal forecast, and the other is according to the model I've built. But I want to go into some depth, or not some depth, just mention one of the polls that if I was doing weighting of polls, I would weigh this company's polls a tremendous amount, and that is Selzer & Company. They are rated A+ by 538 for a reason. And yeah, it may not add up to 100 due to rounding. You look at them, and wow, Trump's improved a lot. And on the likely voters, it gets even closer, as you can see. And you go to everyone, and you can go scroll through this yourself and look at the questions and the breakdowns, and even talk about the methodology. And basically, this company, Selzer & Company, does polling correctly. And they moved some polls around because that was 4654 yesterday. I guess they moved that one up and then put this one here. 538 moves polls around all the time and in their latest polls. It's annoying, but whatever. So there was some question last week about, let's go down to New York. So I mentioned this briefly, that your home state, if you're, the president's home state and the home state of the vice president, they will get a boost. And whenever the Democrats get a candidate whenever they do get a candidate, so around August of 2020, I'm going to give their candidates a boost in the states where they hail from. So, yeah. That said, this does create, because of the way I've done it, a 14% swing in favor of the Republicans. I can understand why some people would be concerned about that. I've been tempted, but that's because of the way it was written in the source where I got those swing, how much better a candidate does in their home state when they run for president. Because of the way I read it, I'm taking it literally, as in their vote total improves by, if they're at the top of the ticket, it improves by 7%. So Trump's home state being New York, I'm doing 7%. And the reason why is because that's an average. That's not a max limit or a minimum limit. 7% is the average, which is the correct thing to do. However, I think what 538 meant to write was that it was a 7% swing. Not in that maybe I'm reading it wrong. So in the comments, go ahead and let me know if you think I should make it a 7% swing for president, and for vice president, a 3% swing, rather than what winds up being a 14% swing and a 6% swing. Though Indiana looks to be correct, so I don't know. Like I said, let me know if I should switch it to just a 7% swing rather than what it winds up being right now. Because I do actually think maybe I misread it. It happens. So, plus it'll make the results look a little bit better because that's just outside of 10%. Anyway, so let's actually look at what the model says as of today. North Carolina is by far the closest state, with it being under 0.5%. And sorry about that. As it stands, this is what the forecast, what my forecast says, or what my model says the election should turn out as, which is pretty much dead, the opposite of what happened in 2016 in terms of the electoral vote total. And that is with a national, by the way, I haven't changed any of this yet because I don't think it's changed enough. With a national lead of just about 9% and 15% going to undecided candidates. There is an advantage for Republicans in the Electoral College at the current moment, simply because swing states on average tend to be slightly more Republican leaning than the safe states. And this is why in recent times, if a candidate has won the Electoral College despite not getting a plurality of votes, and the reason why I'm using plurality is because the last president to actually win the popular vote was Barack Obama. Like, the last candidate to win the popular vote outright was Barack Obama. And before that, it was, Obama again. And before that, it was George W. Bush. And the previous time before that was H.W. The thing is, because elections are generally competitive in the United States and there's enough of a third-party effect, it's somewhat difficult to reach 50% of the popular vote. So when people say Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, I correct them and say she won a plurality of the vote. She gained the most out of any candidate, but she didn't win it. Most people did not want her as president. And they say, well, that's just not true. And I'm going to say, no, 50% of the people voted against her. Actually, it was 52%. Now, it said 54% of the people didn't want Donald Trump. Okay? I'm not going to take that away from them. But I am going to say she didn't win the popular vote. But I will say, yes, she got the most. She got a plurality. But it's actually difficult for a Democrat to win. It's going to be difficult for a Democrat to win an election without the best way to phrase it is without getting a substantial popular vote lead. And 2% really isn't. 2% is, according, most pollsters would say that's within the margin of error for a poll. Obviously, there's no margin of error when it's an actual vote tally, but you get my point. I'd say about 3.5% would be the amount needed for a Democrat to actually win the Electoral College. They would have to win the popular vote nationally by about 3%, or be 3% better than the Republican in a presidential election. So this is my model. This is what it forecasts. And remember, New York's a bit weird because of the way I'm interpreting the home state, the favorite son factor, so to speak, or should I say favorite child, because women can run for president. I figure I should at least give credit to that. So my forecast, it assumes that, wow, that was a lot of stuttering there. It assumes that polling is going to indicate a very close election. I think this is the most fair, this is what we've had for a while now, actually. Since the mid-90s, well, not really. Since the year 2000, we haven't had an election where the victor won by more than 10% in the popular polls. And without the recession in 2008, it's extremely likely we wouldn't have had the victor win by more than 5% since 1996. So I think it's reasonable to assume that the election is going to be within 5% and probably closer than that, especially with how polarized America is right now. And this is really just my baseline. This is the same thing as my baseline prediction. So yeah. That said, tell me what your thoughts on Ojeda are. Apparently I've been corrected. It's Ojeda, not Ojeda. He's the representative or state senator from this area of West Virginia. I saw a few of his ads. He seems like a very good dude, and I've watched some of them myself, and I've looked at some of his campaign footage from when he was actually on the campaign trail. He's got charisma. I think if he wins the primary, he stands a very good chance of winning the general. The problem I think he's going to run into is winning the Democratic primary. Considering the tone he typically has, it would work well for him in the general because it would be, an attack dog versus an attack dog. And I think Ojeda would be the more credible of the two if it came to a discussion. Ojeda is and he's going to get props from the military community, regardless of regardless of his political positions. Yeah, he's a bit of a progressive when it comes to economics, but he's fairly socially conservative in some areas. I believe he said he didn't even want to support an assault weapons ban, stuff like that, But he's also completely okay with the LGBT community. Seems like a good person, and look at his stuff about going after Congress for making a ton of money and not looking out for working class people. I 100%, I think he could win if he makes it to the general. I think he stands a very good chance of doing that. And yeah, he may not be the type of candidate, say, California and Massachusetts want, but he'd be the candidate the Rust Belt in Texas and Florida and the flyover states would want. Essentially, Ojeda is the candidate the swing states want. Someone like Kamala Harris is a candidate that California wants. And Elizabeth Warren is what Boston wants. Booker is what Newark wants. Avenatti, he's what New York City wants. Ojeda is what Tulsa wants. Ojeda is what Savannah wants. Ojeda is what Little Rock wants. Ojeda is what Sioux Falls wants. He's someone who's going to protect the New Deal, maybe try and revamp it to a modern era. Whether or not you think it needs to, that's what he's going to campaign on. He's going to campaign on a military that is effective but not bloated. He's going to campaign on preserving American liberties. And yeah, he'll criticize his own party for going after some liberties and trying to limit them. But he's also going to stand up for some liberties that the Democratic Party wants to preserve. And he's going to campaign as somebody who is actually going to be competent in handling foreign diplomacy. I think he can do it. Again, I think he can do it. But the tough part for him is going to be getting through the Democratic primary, where I think he would lose. Simply because I don't think Democratic primary voters want someone with his tone. Or some of his more less democratic positions. Anyway, so moving on from presidential stuff to the Senate stuff. And truthfully, like I said, I really don't think any of these Senate elections are going to go differently than their presidential ones. And I'm just going to only do, leans. Oops. Yeah. There may be some swing in these. And yeah, Doug Jones he's already a lame duck. You may as well count him as a lame duck. I'm actually going to lean New Hampshire blue. Maine Suzanne Collins could survive if President Trump loses a state, but I don't think so. So I'm actually going to lean that one to the Democrats. By the way, Mississippi is going to go for the incumbent Cindy Hyde-Smith, who did pull out the runoff victory. I thought that would be closer than it was simply because of her public hanging comment. So I was a little surprised that it was basically the same thing as the state's party lean. I was going to lean, same thing with Georgia. Colorado, I don't think Gardner's going to win that state. I think whoever the Republican is going to just get carried by Trump to the victory simply because the state's not going to go differently than the presidential result. Same thing with Texas. I actually think Cornyn's going to outperform Trump in Texas. North Carolina, probably going to go to the Republican, but it's a very close race that I wouldn't be too shocked if it does go to the Democrats. Virginia, more than likely Mark Warner's going to keep his seat. Go to Michigan. Even if Trump loses, if they recruit John James again, he stands a good chance. I still think he loses, don't get me wrong. But I think John James would outperform Trump in this state for a few reasons, and I'm going to say none of it has to do with the fact he is an African American, because I don't think that's, personally for me, that wouldn't be a big factor. But I can understand that some people would see that as a factor. But I think he's just more popular is the reason why he would outperform Trump in the state. And he is a small business owner, and he's local, and I think he can speak better to the working class in that state. Minnesota, I really don't see it going for whoever the Republican is. So Republicans win one, they flip one seat, but they lose two. So that would be a net gain for the Democrats of one seat, and you would have 52 Republicans and 48 Democrats in 2021. I don't know. This seems reasonable. Suzanne Collins could keep her seat easily. The rest, again, it really depends. The rest of the swing states, or the non-safe states. It just depends on the presidential election. For example, if North Carolina votes for the Democratic nominee for president, Democrat's going to win here. If Michigan goes for Trump, whoever the Republican is going to win in this state. So we're going to exit out of that and look at the gubernatorial elections. Again, unless a really popular Democrat runs in Kentucky, doesn't matter how unpopular the governor is. When you combine incumbency plus political polarization, that's a lot to overcome. Mississippi, same thing, except the governor isn't as unpopular. And again, John Bel Edwards is extremely popular in Louisiana. I don't see him losing. That said, governor's races, there is a lot more crossover because governors tend to, gubernatorial elections tend to focus on that state particularly, and they're not very nationalized. A few do get nationalized, but not that many. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Bye.